Also with us this morning is Jordan Schlipf of Rainmaking Innovation UK. A partner at Rainmaking Innovation, Jordan specializes in collaborating with corporates, governments, and universities to come together with startups to foster innovation that transforms industries. Jordan is a serial entrepreneur, former VC, and an expert trainer. He will now touch on the topic of innovation how, moving beyond the buzzwords to the practical how. Over to you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and good morning. I'm pretty excited to be here. So let me jump straight in. Too big to fail. In today's world of Moore's law, mature social networks, and ready supply of venture capital, do any of us really still believe that we're too big to fail? Now, I'm going to go back and look at some of what we call the cliche stories today. Right? So if we look at WhatsApp, WhatsApp went from an idea in September 2011 to sending 30 billion messages per day in 2015. So that's 30 billion messages per day versus 20 billion of all other global SMSs sent. From an idea to 50% greater than global SMS in less than 4 years. Right? Now, in 2014, Facebook bought WhatsApp. Does anyone remember how much they paid for it? How much? It was $19 billion. $19 billion from an idea to 3 years. Does anyone know how many employees they had when they got acquired? Guess. Does anyone guess? It was about 50 employees. 50 employees at the time of acquisition, 3 years from an idea to $19 billion. All right? Well, we all know this one, Uber. Uber went from an idea to surpassing Ford and General Motors in valuation, being valued at over $70 billion in just less than 5 years. Right? We know this. That's why we're here today. Right? We understand all these things, that circa 50% of the S&P 500 will be replaced over the next 10 years. If you don't create the things that will kill your company, someone else will. It's the fast fish that eats the slow fish. $148 billion of venture capital invested globally last year in 2015. That's invested. That's not the funds raised. That's $150 billion deployed into startups last year. Now, we don't believe in too big to fail. The evidence is out there. The truth is, instead, we understand the need to embrace that Darwinian principle of adapt or die, right? But in many ways, when we talk about these sort of conferences and corporate innovation, this is what we've been talking about for far too long. We keep talking about the why, right? And essentially, over the last 3 to 4 years, all I've heard again and again and again are these types of stories about the Ubers, the WhatsApps, the Airbnbs, the Dropboxes, venture capital, digital disruption, cloud, you name it, right? The why. So where are we today? Where literally are we today, given the fact that we keep talking about this? Well, here's some real quotes from conversations I've had this year. So Chief Strategy Officer, Fortune 500. We really want to use innovation to change the company and create the next billion-dollar business line. So we're ready to invest 50 to 100,000 in a couple of initiatives this year. Okay? Now, if you get that return of investment, you will blow my mind, right? But the scenario here is, does the appetite really match the opportunity? Right? What about this one? Senior VP at a major insurance underwriter. We need to start focusing more on innovation because otherwise we'll be disrupted within the next 10 to 20 years. Or maybe the next 10 to 20 months. There are still those that don't yet fully understand the gravity or the time frame of the why, the urgency. Head of digital at a big bank, multinational bank. Jordan, we've never had a single IT project fail. We've always delivered on time, on budget, and to the specifications scoped out. Great. But does anybody use that product? Does it drive material revenues or value for the bank? And he looks at me and goes, hey, that's not what I measured on. That's not my KPI. And I'm like, yeah, but do you know that? He's like, yeah, they're not going so well. So this definition of an IT project failing, it's just we're putting it into the wrong metrics. We're measuring it by the wrong yardstick. Oh, this is my favorite, the innovation garage, right? This, hey, we haven't figured out our strategy, but we've got the coolest coffee maker available. This concept of real estate. Trust me around this. You create an innovation garage, a hub, a lab, whatever you want to call it. No amount of bean bags, no amount of ping pong tables, funky coffee machines will solve your problems. Right? And I understand that real estate is tangible. I understand you've got the skills to make that happen. And it's something to get excited in, and it's kind of a physical display, a rallying call to show your commitment to this. I get that. But it's not going to move the needle on the things that really matter for your business and for your customers. How about this one? Head of group strategy, a large telco. We've identified the 5 core strategic areas of interest, and we've got a dedicated team monitoring them. Awesome. Now, the truth is, we can all identify the big waves coming. That is not the problem. If you're a car manufacturer, it's obvious. It's electronic vehicles, autonomous vehicles, sharing economy, CO2, etc. But observation, and I agree, I totally agree. Observation alone fails. Right? You need to participate and execute in the market. And there are still far too many of us stood on the beach, surfboard in hand, looking out for those waves we have identified to appear. And when they do, we jump on the surfboard and we start paddling out, only to realize it's too late. Right? We're not going to be able to ride the wave. We're going to be consumed by it. Now, instead, what we should be doing, what we need to do, is to put ourselves out at sea. We need to put our businesses out at the breakers, where we have the option to catch these waves. And then we need the right vehicle in order to ride and own those waves. Right? A rowboat, doesn't matter if you put it out on the breakers, will simply topple over and collapse. So we need a surfboard so we can ride this. So what are corporate innovation surfboards, and how do we put our organizations out at sea to be able to have the opportunity and to be able to ride and own these waves that are coming? So it turns out that most of us, when we look at the big corporates, are flocking to the same 4 corporate innovation initiatives. These 4 preferred methods of participating being 1, investment or corporate venture capital. Now, personally, I don't get this. I don't get it. We all know that the #1 success factor of any fund, of any venture capital fund, is deal flow. Does your organization really have access to the best entrepreneurs, the best startup investments, both the quality and the quantity? Do you have and can you attract the right venture capital talent to invest these funds? Can you remunerate them in line with market of the best general partners, GPs who run their own funds? Now, even so, we also know the data's there that venture capital as an investment asset class is terrible. 75% of all venture capital funds fail to return any money. But you say, no, Jordan, it's okay. We can make strategic investments where we connect our portfolio companies, our little startups that we've invested in, to the mothership, to the core business. And we can leverage unfair advantage by all our existing resources and infrastructure. And that's how we're going to compete and outperform. And I go, sounds great on paper. Prove it. The reality of every corporate venture capital fund I've seen, you talk to the GPs. Talk to how many of them get to realize any value by connecting their portfolio companies to their big business. Zero. Why? Because their big business fights it. You go, hey, we've invested in this startup. Can we get this business unit to back it and do something with it? They're like, whatever. Who are you? Why are you talking to me? There is so much internal friction. Do not underestimate that. Sounds great on paper. The reality of being able to release that, achieve that, is exceptionally hard. But okay, let's say you are successful. Let's say you raise a $50 million fund, $100 million fund, you target corporate venture capital, you go and invest in a bunch of good startups. What does success look like? So maybe you return 3 times your cash, maybe 10 times your cash, right? But on what time frame? Realistically, 5 to 7 years. So 5 to 7 years from now, maybe you get 3x, 10x your cash. The world's going to change. How is this addressed your underlying innovation issues? Are you really more responsive, adaptive, and resilient as an organization? And the crazy thing is, even the best CVC funds out there, Intel Capital, Qualcomm Ventures, Intel Capital does super well as a VC fund. The revenues it generates in 5 to 7 years is still a freaking rounding error compared to Intel's revenue, real revenue. Like, does it move the needle? Okay, I can buy some more pens, great. Like, seriously. 2, mergers and acquisitions. Now, this is acquisitions, not mergers, because startups aren't large enough for you to merge with, right? Now, the truth is this is super expensive, and more often than not, the results are disappointing. I mean, we've seen the early days of this, the early days of Silicon Valley, where corporates ran into Silicon Valley like kids in a candy store with cash, buying up a ton of breakthrough technology. And then they integrated these acquisitions to their core business, the mothership. And typically, they suffocated what they bought. Was it really breakthrough technology they were buying? Do WhatsApp and Uber, are they really breakthrough technology? Do they have a portfolio of patents? No. So, did these acquisitions genuinely create shareholder value? I think the jury is out on that, and I think the truth is it's very rare does this M&A of startups really create genuine shareholder value. 3, startup competitions. Now, startup competitions, open innovation. We're going to crowdsource startups and developers to build solutions for our problems. Why would they do that? Seriously, what is the value proposition to them? It's so easy to be in that mindset of like, I've got all these problems and all these other people can solve them for me. Right? Now, in Europe, and particularly the US, startups, developers, and the startup ecosystem are very wary of what it was, the corporate take mentality that existed in the early days of open innovation, where the corporates were so focused on their needs, on their problems, they failed to grasp the other side of the coin, the startups and the entrepreneurs. What's in it for them? And the truth is, startups and entrepreneurs do not relish being treated as some sort of low-cost or free outsourced development agency. So until you are mindful of what's in it for them, they won't rally to you. Doesn't matter how big your brand is. However, when done right, these can be a great feeder into follow-on programs and initiatives in your innovation mix. They can be super powerful. Just don't fall into the usual traps. Accelerators. Accelerators can also be great when done well, at the right stage, at the right time for your organization. But mediocre and exceptionally overpriced when you get it wrong. Now, in Europe alone, there's over 150 accelerator programs that exist. So what design, which program is right for you? For both your appetite and your capability level as your organization. Now, with the right program, it's an awesome tool for learning, for participating in the market, and for applied R&D or corporate startup engagement. They can be super, super powerful. But you need to be asking the right questions to judge what's the right program, what's the right partner, what's the right stage for your business. Now, are these the most impactful methods of participating or executing for your company? These 4 common methods of participation. Now, the truth is, we're all more comfortable walking down a pre-trodden path. And we're still very concerned and reactionary to what our competitors are doing. Furthermore, we're not very good at learning from each other and each other's mistakes. Agile, digital transformation, MVP, fail fast, innovate. The truth is, corporate innovation space is still very fragmented. It's exceptionally noisy, and it's full of buzzwords, which are often misused and wildly misunderstood. We don't yet have a common blueprint of best practices when it comes to addressing the why. We don't have an industry standard we can rely on, but nor can we afford to wait. So we need to stop talking about the why, and we need to start focusing on the practical how. Because that's where I want to turn up to conferences in the future, where people are actually sharing best practice around the practical how. So as my old physics teacher used to say, Dr. Gray, he says, a wise man learns from his mistakes, but a genius learns from the mistakes of others. So let us look at some of the common mistakes and common pitfalls that we see at Rainmaking. Common pitfall, lack of preparedness for the next phase. So you completed an awesome hackathon. Woo! Now what? What happens to those ideas, those teams? You've deployed an open internal innovation platform, right? And you've got where you've got the whole organization submitting ideas. You've successfully created that feeding frenzy of innovation aspiration across your organization. Some great ideas were submitted. Then 6 months goes by, 9 months goes by, and you've done nothing with them. Nothing is communicated back to the individuals in your organization. And your organization, your people, are now disillusioned by your innovation efforts and disengage. You really need to think about the phasing of this in the journey, not just your customer journey, but the journey of your innovation. You do one thing, what's the knock-on effect? What's the next thing? Don't just tick the box and put yourself potentially in a worse position when you come around to doing the next thing when you eventually figure it out. What about this? Ideation straight into scoping and development. So as part of some process, you generate, you screen, and you identify some great ideas. And the key internal stakeholders want, good ideas that key internal stakeholders want to champion. You get excited and someone asks for a plan, right? And then you fall back into the typical old school waterfall approach. You start scoping out and developing a product, a functioning prototype, an MVP, essentially ignoring lean startup approach of small steps of continuous iteration, of validation, of experimentation. Instead, you overinvest in a very early stage idea, and you expose yourself for far too much risk by doing this. Stopping at rapid prototyping, how to scale. So you've built this awesome prototype, this fully functioning early stage project, which you've been targeting and you've been wanting to do this for so long, and finally you get there. You've built this thing, it's amazing. Only to realize now that you've deployed it, you don't have the requisite knowledge and skills to achieve product market fit, to get retention, to build a business, and in turn, capture the full value of this opportunity. Another common pitfall, accelerators with limited to no engagement. The true value from partnering in an accelerator program can only be achieved with some level of capability, commitment, and engagement, whether that be through ongoing structured mentoring, attending selection days, workshops, showcase events, startup deep dives, demo days. running pilots or even proof of concepts with a few selected startups in each cohort. If your accelerator effort is too external, too ring-fenced from your organization, and you are not engaging and participating with it, you won't get the benefits. Proof of concepts with a slow and frictional process. Now, corporates and startups, they operate at different speeds, on different scales, with different mindsets and fixed processes, making successful commercial engagements challenging. And if you haven't got enough internal capability, some basic version of what we call a physical API, that interface layer where you connect growth stage startups with your organization, procurement, legal, security, IT, all that stuff. If you can't physically connect them and operate at a sufficient level of capability, not only will the desired outcomes of these engagements, these pilots, be unlikely to be achieved, but you could very easily hurt the startup. They have limited runway. You're like the oil tanker to their little jet ski. And if you drag them along in the wrong direction, you can genuinely end up hurting them and killing them. They run out of runway. They run out of money. And in turn, your brand and your credibility in this startup ecosystem will be tarnished. And you now will lose that competitive advantage of being able to tap into it, to do outsourced R&D, to move faster, to adapt. And if your competitors haven't got a tarnished brand, they will get more engagements with startups. Lack of ecosystem and a portfolio approach. Now, corporate innovation to me can and should be thought of as an ecosystem. You know, a good analogy is the startup ecosystem itself. You have a bunch of ideas, then teams are formed, then you have pre-accelerator, really early stage teams, then accelerator startups, seed investment, Series A, and so on. And as you go down this life cycle, this ecosystem, you notice that every good ecosystem has a tapered effect. You have a ton of ideas. Some of them make it to teams, startups, and so on, and fewer still really end up disrupting and changing the world, the Ubers, the Airbnbs. But you won't get those if you don't have enough at the front of the funnel. So when you are looking at your innovation initiatives, you need to look at it as an ecosystem and say, do I really have enough? Am I killing enough? Do I have enough go, no-go decisions in my ecosystem to get the few things that are really going to succeed? The other one is a portfolio approach. Right? Now, the truth is that we need to take a portfolio approach versus linear thinking, this corporate project management mindset of, well, we'll do A, and if A works, we'll then do B, and if B works, and so on, right? Now, the innovation environment, by definition, is uncertain. And so when you're operating in environments which are uncertain, which are volatile, you need, a bit like a venture capitalist, you need to take a portfolio approach. It is too risky to take this sort of project management linear approach. So you need to have a portfolio of lots of things to test and learn. And over time, double down on the stuff that's working. All right. So beyond these common pitfalls, there are bigger underlying core challenges that we face and the need to be addressed in order to successfully adapt and thrive. Culture and mindset. So mindset about navigating uncertainty, being able to make decisions differently. And if you make decisions differently, you behave differently. And the culture is where the tribe accepts this new behavior. So if you're behaving more entrepreneurially, will the organization, will the people accept that, nourish it, or will they add friction and try and kill it, kick you out the tribe? The knowledge and the skill set. What we're doing and what we continue need to be able to do not underestimate the skills and the knowledge that are needed to operate in today's world, let alone tomorrow's. I mean, literally tomorrow's. To the point of process and structure. This will have a fundamental change in the environment. If you keep applying your standard governance, decision-making, incentivization, all of these things, the environment, none of your innovation initiatives will thrive. Because you can't grow a plant without sunlight or water or oxygen. You need to create the right structure to enable these innovation initiatives to thrive. And that means not a one environment suits all or one size fits all approach. Instead, you need to be looking and asking yourself, what is this initiative? How do I design the right temporary organization or the right process and structure to govern that? And take a more batched and portfolio approach to even doing process and structure. And then internal buy-in, the political capital that either makes it possible or makes it impossible. Right? That's the tragedy. Now, looking at a few real-world examples of how we can go about addressing some of these issues, let's look at culture and mindset. So, embracing failure to run all the hardest parts of the problem first, as fast as possible. The only way to make progress is to make a ton of mistakes, to go out and find and even create negative experiences that help us learn and get better. Astro Teller, director at X, which is Google's moonshot factory. Now this is the engine of innovation where the fuel is customer validated learning. Now as a thought experiment, I want to try with you all right now. I would like you to recall a project that you've done that took you a non-insignificant period of time, say 2-3 months. And at the end of that project, when you got the answer and you delivered it, whatever it may be, I took away that essay, that product, that code, the report, and I came back to you a couple of weeks later. I said, hey, I give you the same problem. Will it take you the same amount of time to get to the answer? Absolutely not. Maybe 10% to build that prototype, to write that essay again. That other 90% is what it took you to figure out what the right answer was. Innovation, to me, is simply put, is how do we reduce the time and or the cost to get to that learning, to figure out what the right solution is. That's it. That's innovation. How do we do that? So how do we really do this? And when we're looking at culture and mindset, this is a big barrier because when we say stuff like the major challenges of lean startup fails fast, saying it doesn't make it happen within our organizations. Because when you say this to people, the CEO stands up, we need to transform, we need to innovate, we need to be entrepreneurial. And everyone goes, well, okay. Fail fast. Great. The people who are executing those projects, what they are actually asking themselves is, what happens if I fail fast? Am I going to get fired? Will I lose all the people who are reporting to me on that project? What happens to my compensation? What happens to my prospects for promotion? In business, we always know this. There's this huge gulf that exists between what we say we should do and what we do. That gulf of what we say we should do, what we know we should do, versus what we do is the difference between the lip service, fail fast, innovate, and the path of emotional least resistance. Right? If people do not actually believe that they won't get fired if they fail, if they do not actually believe that they won't be celebrated, that their compensation, that their future prospects will not be tarnished, they won't do it. Right? So a lot of this challenge of innovation is really essentially a task of cultural engineering, of how do we get the path of what we should do to match up with the path of emotional least resistance. Because if we don't do that, it will never happen. Real example is a mass mentoring program we did with Unilever. So Unilever came to us and they said, we do this annual survey with our 2,000 marketeers globally every single year. And we've seen some really worrying trends. We've seen trends where our 2,000 marketeers, the engine of our brand creation, our revenue drivers for our business, well, their fear of failure is increasing. The time to launch new products in new markets is increasing. The independent decision-making is reducing. Right? We are worried about this this trend, these negative trends, with the people who we know are good. The people haven't changed. We know they're capable. But the culture and the mindset is like going in a crazy trend. So we created what we call the Mass Mentoring Program, because there's 2,000 marketeers globally. So how do we deal with this? Well, simply put, we took some of their IP, the carrot, to dangle them to engage with corporates. We took their IP around how they create brands and how they do marketing. We cleaned it up so that there was really good sort of methodologies and content that are relevant for startups. And we created a structured 8 mentoring sessions. So 1-hour sessions every fortnight over effectively 16 weeks. And we partnered up a real VP or a real marketer with a real startup. The value proposition to the startup is simple. We will connect you to a Unilever marketer who will teach you and open for the first time how they go about building brands and doing marketing, right? In a structured, light touch engagement. Now, working with startups can inspire and showcase how to execute faster, how to increase our speed of operation. And it also helps with culture, this concept of experiencing entrepreneurship in action. You know, done is better than perfect. Failure is okay so long as we've learned something and that we're fast and we iterate. So the Mass Mentoring Program allowed us, within a few months in London, to partner 200 marketers with 200 startups to engage in a value-add mentoring program, 1 hour every fortnight over 8 weeks or 16 weeks, 8 structured mentoring sessions. When we did the annual survey at the end of that year, the transformation in the culture and mindset of these marketeers was measured. It was dramatically changed. This is low cost, this isn't expensive, this is real. Knowledge and skills. I mean, ultimately this comes down to workshops or partnering. Now, it turns out that we're all plenty smart enough and we're all plenty creative enough to innovate. That's actually the easy part. Like, who here, actually, just a quick question, who here thinks that they are creative? Hands up if you think you are creative. Right. So all of those with hands up, awesome. All of those who don't have your hands up, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Who here wasn't creative when they were 6 years old? We all were created. It's just educated out of us. Right? That's the truth of our education system. And the truth is, we can educate it back. Right? We can create. We are all plenty smart enough and creative enough. I promise you this. The hard part is actually acknowledging what we don't know, our weaknesses, what our true capabilities are today. Not underestimating the skills and the new skills we need and that are needed. And investing in the training, the upskilling, the workshops that are required to make us effective. And if you have sufficient time frames, you know, a year, 2 years, whatever it may be, I always believe investing in your people. If you invest in them, it might take them 6 months to get really up to speed, but it will always pay dividends to you in the long run. People first, product and services, profits last. I totally agree. So for us, alternatively, if time frames and certain initiatives are much shorter and you need to get results sooner, you can partner with proven entrepreneurs that can provide these skill sets, this knowledge, and hit the ground running from day one. Process and structure. Technically, this will be unique, as I've mentioned, to specific initiatives, depending on their objectives and their constraints. But let me give you one example, an applied tech lab. So an applied tech lab is where we globally source targeted growth stage startups to run focused commercial pilots and proof of concepts with a particular organization, right? To tap in to that R&D that the VCs are funding effectively. Now, Orange came to us and they said, we understand that corporate startup engagement is a competitive advantage. And our business model that we have today is going to tend to zero in the future. I can't charge for data and minutes and text. We need to reinvent ourselves in new ways. Right? So how can we tap in to the startup ecosystem to do this? Now, the truth is, their organization wasn't quite ready yet to engage with startups because their biggest friction was themselves, their internal friction of trying to get a business unit to engage with a startup to do a live pilot. The interesting thing we did was to adapt and redesign the Applied Tech Lab to work for where they were as an organization, not where we wanted them to be. And the interesting thing about the @orange.com email address is that opens up doors to any other corporate. You want a meeting with ITV or BBC next week, and if @orange.com emails them, boom, they get it. Startups, that is an impossibility. So suddenly what we did is we redesigned the program to instead run pilots externally with the other organizations, major organizations. So we started running pilots with Unilever, with ITV, where we were getting startups in the key strategic areas that Orange were interested in. And when we got to them, we said, okay, we've got this new advertising tech. And Unilever said, that's amazing, but we don't really have budgets to do it. We said, it's okay. Orange will pay for the pilot. But we're going to sit here and we're going to participate and we're going to learn what's working and what's not. And it was a way to start tapping into corporate startup engagement before the organization had really built its internal physical API capabilities. And to showcase that this stuff really does move the needle. So working with startups helps mitigate the risks and reduces the time to market compared to traditional R&D. And it comes at a much lower cost to both traditional R&D and to M&A. Internal stakeholder buy-in. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure this one out. We've seen stuff work super well with certain organizations, yet utterly fail in others. We've seen things like executive workshops, videos, internal showcases, structured mentoring, internal meetups, deliver and create a movement within certain organizations, but not work in others. And I don't really know yet how to do this effectively in a sort of repeatably trustworthy way. Right now, we're looking at this, or we're going to run an experiment with a tier 1 car manufacturer, who's one of our partners. And we're going to partner up with a company called Avant-Garde, who are a very, very cool experiential marketing company. But the interesting thing is, we're going to see and run an experiment, well, what happens if we target the innovation initiatives, the programs we're running, and we create internal experiential marketing campaigns and run them internally with all the employees, with all the key stakeholders, with everyone to see how that can potentially increase the efficacy of internal buy-in and support. I don't know whether it'll work or not, but I want to try. Now, given today's reality within organizations, whatever you choose to do, if you don't shoot for big enough wins from the get-go, there may not be enough to show to get you more resource. Now, I just want to, before I close, I want to ask a quick exercise. I want to give you 2 options, 2 choices. Choice A, you can deliver $1 million of value to your business, 100% guaranteed, in the next 12 months, circa 12 months. That's option A. Option B, you have a 1 in 100 chance of delivering $1 billion of value to your business in maybe 2 to 3 years. What choice would you take? Hands up for option A. Any hands up for option A? Hands up for option B. Awesome, right? You already have that entrepreneurial, like multiplier, moonshot mindset, right? Of that 10x, not pretend 10% like improvement nonsense. Not optimization, but transformation, but change. That's amazing that you have that mindset. That is half of the battle right there. But now let me ask you this. How many of your managers or your CEOs, board of directors, would support you if you chose option B? This takes courage. Courage is one of the biggest barriers we all face when we come at looking at innovation. It takes courage to lay down and say, do you know what? That 1 in 100 chance to change the game entirely. What if? Versus falling back into that scenario of, well, we'll just take the 1 million. Is it really going to move the needle? Courage is a big problem here, people. Now, innovation initiatives are defined based on their context in the specific market, industry, and organization. It's very specific to your circumstances. The most important definition of innovation is your own. Now, at Rainmaking, we don't have all the answers, but we do know what questions to ask. And together, we can help you, we can partner with you to find your own definition of innovation. Thank you.